the first exercise that I like to show my students and teach them is how to actually take a single color and create value out of it, meaning a light, a medium, and a dark. So I'm gonna rinse all of the paint and the water out of my brush with my water over here and kind of dry that off a little bit. But what I want to do is show you how you can use these colors. And I'm just going to draw with my brush just a little circle here. And I'm going to do 3. Okay, now they're all about the same value. What I'm gonna do here is grab a little bit more paint on my brush, go over here and mix it with a little water. I'm gonna go and tap this in to that top one. And I'm gonna take whatever's left on that brush, I'm gonna kind of tap it in on that one. And what I'm doing is creating different values with that same color. So a dark, a medium, and a light. When these dry, they are gonna dry a little bit lighter than what you see them on the paper. And when you paint with watercolor, you're painting from light to dark. It's the complete opposite of what you use with oil and acrylic, but that's how you use watercolor, is you layer it. You start with your lightest layer first, and then you add your medium layers, and then you add your darkest layers, or your most opaque layers. And you let each layer dry before you lay on top of another one. That is really the secret with watercolor that a lot of people get frustrated with, is that they think that you have to just paint the whole thing while it's wet, just like you would with acrylic or oil, but then it just turns into a big mess. Hi, sweetie.
I go paint this.
Yeah. So let's do another color.
I do window.
You're gonna do the window?
I go do this one.
Oh, do that one. All right, now we're gonna move on to the Ultramarine Blue. So you can see I'm kind of just using my brush and just kind of pulling just a little bit of it out with the tip of that brush. And you can grab more water. And obviously the bigger area that you're gonna be painting, the more water and the more paint you're gonna want to fill up in this little well and actually use that to paint with. And we'll do that in the next exercise. So same thing with the blue. I'm gonna do 3 different circles here. You can do these even lighter than this if you would like. So I'm gonna add a little bit more to that one. And then to make that top one there really dark, I'm gonna take a little bit from this, directly from the paint, mix it with a little water. But you can see how vibrant these colors are and how you can get a different value out of them. Now the yellow is a little tricky because it's just yellow. It's pretty light already. So you don't necessarily need, you don't have to try to do that. But another thing that you can do, so you can kind of pull from the yellow here, put it in your palette. And I do this with every new color that I get, because I always want to test it out because it's going to look completely different from what's on the label to what it actually looks like on your palette and then on the paper. So this is another option that you can do. Let's just do full square like that. Now up here at the top, I want this to be the most vibrant spot. That way I can sort of see, all right, this is what's gonna look like if I use almost just the straight paint, just a tiny bit of water, and then this is what it's gonna look like once I bring that down. It's very similar to sort of what you see here when you get a color chart like this. So you can do different options for that. You can kind of keep going down with it if you want. So those are our 3 primary colors. These are a couple different ways that you can do this exercise. This is very important because we are going to use this a couple more times, and this really teaches you how to actually use the paint and the water to create different values from that, because you can get a lot of different color variations from it. So I'm just going to kind of show you what these other colors look like straight out of the tube. So I'm going to rinse my brush out, and then with just a wet brush, I'm just going to kind of mop that down. And you take a little bit darker, tap that in there at the top, and while this is wet, it'll all kind of blend together. So that's that natural Sienna from Daniel Smith, and then here is the burnt Sienna from Winsor Newton. So I'm going to rinse my brush out. I have just a plain wet brush, and you see how much value you can get out of that. So it's kind of neat how this looks like a gradient. That's what you're really, looking for when you want to test out your colors. Now, another great reason to do this is because when I use my palette like this, all these colors look exactly the same. So I actually have a chart that I keep for myself to where I can see exactly what color is where. Because it's like that may be purple, that may be black, that may be a blue or a green. These especially I have to kind of keep track of because, I don't use all of these colors all the time. So I need to actually know which ones are which before I start painting with them, because these are going to look very different once they're actually here on your paper. So you can see something like that. Looks quite different on paper with water than it does on the palette. So, this all is a little very helpful stuff for when you get a palette set up like this. All right, so one of the colors that I use the most is my Ultramarine Blue. I like mixing him with other colors, so I'm gonna take a little bit of that one and pull it over here. Try to have a new well for color. This is not really color that you see out in nature a whole lot, which is why mixing colors is very important. So I've got my blue here. I'm going to rinse out my brush, and then I'm going to take some of my burnt sienna. I'm going to mix that up here with the ultramarine blue. You can see how much it's changed in the palette. This is where you do your mixing, not on the paper. You want to do it on your palette. Okay. So I'm going to show you how this color comes to life. As you can see, it's toned down that blue quite a lot. And in fact, this is a color combination commonly known as Payne's gray. Now, this has about a 50-50 combination. So you can see how much more blue it is than it is brown. But, so if I was to actually take a little bit more of that burnt sienna, and just a hint of the blue, I think it's potty time. So mixing takes just a little bit of patience as well, just to kind of get that exact. But I can kind of already start to see, like, all right, this is a little bit warmer tone. So maybe I'm going to take a little bit more of that burnt sienna, because what I'm really looking for is a brown, just like that. This is really helpful for doing trees and landscapes, shadows. Both of these colors are really essential. And you can kind of see here on the one that has a little bit more of the blue in it, ultramarine blue tends to granulate and separate more than most colors. And granulation basically just means that it's going to create a little texture. It almost sort of looks crackly when it's completely dry. So these are getting a little bit more dry, but when you really mix the colors together is when you notice how much they separate. I personally love that. I think it's really unique. I think it looks great with watercolor. Some people may not like that, but I think that it's really fun. So you can see how much of a difference it is when you mix these two colors together and what ratio that you're actually using for that. So this one's more burnt sienna, and this one's more of the ultramarine blue. So very kind of similar to this color that's already mixed up. Now this isn't, I don't think this is Payne's gray, but it may be Payne's gray blue. So it's quite more blue than that, but this is really important to know. Another great thing to learn about colors is how to tone a specific color down. So let's say, for instance, you want to use red, and maybe you're painting something that's red, but you need a couple of different variations of red. You need one that's a little bit more neutral and more toned down. Color wheel is really handy to have, because if you want to neutralize a color, all you need to do is look on the opposite end of the color wheel and go, oh, all right, green is what helps neutralize red. Orange is what helps neutralize blue, and that's really what we just did here. So this little color experiment can work for any of these other colors on your color wheel. So let's say we're painting a cardinal, and we need a bright red, but then we also need something that's a little less red. And let's go ahead and mix up a little bit of green. So I'm going to take some of my ultramarine blue, a little bit of my medium yellow. And the blue is very strong. So when you're mixing with ultramarine blue, it tends to overpower the other color quite a bit. So you may have to kind of adjust your ratios and get, the right color that you really want. All right, so let's take a little bit of that red there and just a touch of our green, because we don't necessarily want it to be a brown color. We just want to tone the red down a little bit. So I can already start to see that that's helped. All right, that's very slight. If you can see here, this one has now lost a little bit more of that brightness to it because of that. So that's a little secret, is to use the opposite color on the color wheel. So yellow and violet are opposite colors. If you want to tone one of those down, just use a little bit one over the other. And on the back of these color charts, it's kind of great because it'll show you kind of what this will do. Yellow, green, adding red, this is the color that you're gonna get. So this is something that I found at a craft store. It sort of breaks it down pretty easily for you to know what your colors are gonna end up looking like.